Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong says that for politics to work, both the government and the opposition must work for Singapore, not only for their parties or supporters. With the parliament now having a record number of 10 elected opposition MPs, he warned against going down the path of combative politics inherent in the British-style parliamentary system. At the same time, he says Singapore's sound politics is unique and is what allows it to plan for the long term and govern effectively. Tan Si Hui reports.
Please.
The ruling People's Action Party won this year's general election with 61.2% of the vote, the lowest share since 2011. And while many voted the opposition, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong says they expected the PAP to form the government. And he called out the Workers' Party for campaigning on this platform.
Senior Minister Teo Chee Hean told me that on the second last day of the general election campaign, a middle-aged lady came up to him, a little agitated. She asked him, "Mr. Teo, is it true? My friends tell me it's okay to vote for the opposition because the government will still be in charge. All the programs the government has promised, they will deliver. MRT, upgrading, new facilities, polyclinic. So don't worry. All the things will still get done and the PAP will work even harder for you. You get everything they promised and 2 persons working for you instead of 1. She was very perturbed and asked him, "Mr. Teo, is that true?" Her question really was, how can this be true? It troubled her profoundly that she did not know how to rebut the argument. Yet in her heart of hearts, she knew instinctively that something was very wrong.
Mr. Lee says the PAP will adapt and respond to changing social and political trends, just like previous generations. Right now, he says the 4G leaders are building bonds with the next generation through initiatives like the SG Together conversations. In Parliament, Mr. Lee expects the PAP to be prepared for sharper questioning from the opposition, which he hopes will suggest alternative proposals. Overall, he says the government will be open-minded, listen to different voices, take in constructive views, and have discussions based on facts and logic.
If it is a major issue which concerns the fundamental interests of the country, the government cannot wait passively for a consensus to form. We will still have a full discussion, in fact, probably an even fuller discussion. But at the end of the discussion, if there are still different views, the government will have to make the decision it judges best and take responsibility for it. Having been elected to govern, we must govern. It is the government's duty to make such decisions and to be accountable for the people, to the people, for them. And if the issue is not policies and priorities, but a challenge to the government's fitness to govern, then the government will have to stand up and defend itself vigorously. It must put down the challenge and prove that it deserves to be the government, because otherwise it must step aside and let another team take over.
While Singapore is modelled on the British Westminster system, which is by nature combative, Mr. Lee notes the country's political traditions have developed differently. Speeches are more substantive and the opposition is more restrained in its style of questioning. But he says it doesn't stop them from taking on the ruling party from time to time.
I listened carefully to Mr. Pritam Singh on Monday describing how he intends to perform the role of leader of the opposition. I applaud his tone and his approach. The government benches will do our part to work with him to keep Parliament a constructive forum for debate. I believe that it is good to have an adequate number of opposition MPs in Parliament. It keeps the government on its toes. It shows the public that the government has nothing to hide and will answer all questions, however awkward. But that does not mean that the more opposition MPs and the more fiery the debate in Parliament is, the better. Or that the tone of our political debate cannot change for the worse. the adversarial dynamic that is inherent in the parliamentary system can go wrong. We all hope that diversity will make 100 flowers bloom. But how do we prevent diversity from producing polarization? How do we make sure that disagreement does not result in paralysis? If this happens to Singapore, we will not just cease being an exceptional nation, it will be the end of us. We must not go down this path.
He urged both the government and opposition to share a common goal of working for Singapore and not just their parties or supporters. This means debate must be based on facts, principles, and shared ideals.
If we do that, then there's a basis for us to manage the inherent tensions in our system and for politics to work out productively. Ultimately, what sort of politics Singapore has depends on Singaporeans themselves, because they have a vital responsibility to engage in the public discourse, to send the right signals at the ballot box, to reward political parties that do the right thing and deliver for the people. The standards they demand of political leaders, PAP and opposition, will influence the quality of the political leadership, the level of discussion and debate in Parliament. They will determine whether our politics enables us to thrive and prosper or divides and destroys us.
Mr. Lee says that Singapore has been unique because it attracts the best people to build a quality public service and political leadership. That's how it's able to deal with problems effectively, and why Singaporeans trust the PAP government to make difficult but right decisions for them. And that's also why they still get re-elected to plan for the long term. But Mr. Lee says this may not always continue.
With more diversity and contestation, can we keep our focus on the long term and plan and build ahead for Singapore? How long can Singaporeans vote for the opposition in some constituencies in the expectation that somehow, somewhere else, their fellow Singaporeans will ensure that the PAP's return to power? Can we continue to get good people into politics, to maintain the quality of our ministers and MPs, and make things happen for Singapore, if more and more citizens prefer the PAP to form the government and yet vote for another party's candidates to be their MPs, for diversity, for checks and balance? At what point does a vote for a strong opposition become a vote for a different government? Is it really true that one day, if there's a change of government, a new party can run Singapore equally well because we have such a good public service, as Mr. Pritam Singh suggested on Monday? These questions have no easy answers. In the nature of politics and of human societies, things can and do go wrong.
That's why he calls it the PAP's sacred mission to keep doing its best for the country. And although the world is not quite the same as before because of COVID-19, the country has survived many crises before, and he's confident it will do so again.
Do not doubt. Do not fear. Jewel will shine again. Changi will thrive again. SIA will be a great way to fly once more. Our economy will prosper anew. Our children and our grandchildren will continue marching forward to build a fairer, ever more just and equal society.